Hey everyone, and welcome to the Love Strong podcast. I'm your host, Cody Morris. In this podcast, we aim to give you a behind-the-scenes look at what makes Diamond C an industry leader in growth, culture, and innovation. In our first series, we're going to explore each of our 28 fundamentals for success in hopes to give you insight, examples, and guidance on how to truly live and embody each fundamental. Our goal each week is to give you the training and development to take back with you into your personal and professional lives so that you can be more successful. Join us each week as we explore the 28 fundamentals, and hopefully you can take from it the fuel that you need for your growth and success. Buckle up and join us for the ride. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of our Fundamentals for Success series. In this series, we're going to talk about a fundamental of the week and really dive into examples and insights and really try and understand the fundamental in its entirety. And so this week, we've got our guest, Jeffrey Crabb, the owner, president, CEO, visionary, the man, the myth, the legend himself, the creator and the person who brought fundamentals to Diamond C. And so, to open up this podcast and open up the series, I want to ask, why fundamentals? What made you make it such a big part of our day-to-day life here at Diamond C?
So, I think the short answer is that high-performing teams, in my experience, high-performing teams and cultures don't happen by accident. They're extremely intentional and carefully built, carefully crafted. And so I was actually at a Vistage meeting, and my Vistage chair introduced this idea of fundamentals. And I just fell in love with it immediately because I had seen us work so hard for so long to build a great culture at Diamond C and just have a difficult time getting traction. Had a difficult time really building a great culture, a high-performing team. And, at the end of the day, I think we're all flawed human beings. I am, you are, we all are. We're all flawed human beings, left to our own demise. Don't usually end up in great shape. That's teams fall apart. Dysfunctional teams are teams that are left to their own demise, that are not intentionally cultivated and turned into high-performing teams. And that's what the fundamental system does. We had identified these 28 behaviors that we focus on, we work on, we talk about, we solve problems with, we use them in our day-to-day language and conversations all the time. And so, through kind of ritualizing them into what we do every day, it's actually moved the needle in helping us to create a much higher performing team when, we're just constantly working at counteracting those human flaws with a focused direction on how we all perform best, how we all show up best, how we are most effective, and how we hone our skills in each one of those behaviors that collectively make us a high performing team.
Absolutely. And so I guess one thing that I've always wondered is, how'd you get to 28? Was there 100 and you whittled it down, or did you, start with 1 and build to 28? How did it work out?
So we had a half-day brainstorming session that started this process where the leadership team all met downtown at a coffee shop, and I basically said with a whiteboard, let's list out every characteristic we can think of, behavior we can think of that would build our dream team. Our dream culture would be made of all of these things. And we did that. We just brainstormed out an exhaustive list. And I don't remember exactly, but I think there were something like 50 or 60 different things on that list.
Oh, wow.
And then, of course, some of them were pretty redundant because it was just totally just a brainstorming session, get them out there. And so from that, I went through a few rounds of iterations with that leadership team, and I cleaned up the list of 50 down to maybe it was 40 or 35, and tried to take out any redundancy and then really just talk through the depth of our understanding and what we meant by each one of those things and how it contributed to building a high performance team or high performing culture, and ended up at 28, which some people say 28, how do you expect everybody to remember 28 fundamentals?
That was my first thought when I got here. Yeah.
And we said we don't expect everybody to remember 28 fundamentals. We expect them to live 28 fundamentals. So it's much more about, really learning them and ingraining them in who we are and our culture than it is about someone being able to recite the list.
Right.
We want them to become a part of our culture, a part of our norm, so that when someone new joins the team, they don't even have to know them or memorize them. It's just how we are, who we are, how we act. And so most folks fall into that environment in which they're placed, and learn. If that's the culture that we exude and that we live by every day, they just flow into that, become a part of that. We don't have to tell them to maintain a positive attitude because they're surrounded by it. That's all there is positive attitude, and any negative attitude is stomped out in a hurry.
Sore thumb sticks
exactly.
out. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's cool is when you get here and, and I first started and you look at the fundamentals and you think, oh, okay, it's a great list. It's a good reference guide. But when you work and you're in meetings and you're around the office, it's so much of a system of accountability. Is that, so many times people will tell me, hey, maintain a positive attitude, speak straight, call the meeting, hey, keep the faith. I mean, at any point in a week here, you're going to get checked and accountable, and we hold everyone accountable. And it's not even in a negative manner.
No.
Assume positive intent lives rampant. That everybody knows when you say, "Hey, call the meeting," you're not having to be negative or tell someone they're doing something bad, but just reference, "Hey, this is what we're about." And if you're here, then here's your reference. Here's your accountability measure. And so that's something that really after I really got embedded here at Diamond C that I noticed and began feeling and it just creates a culture, like you said, intentionally to help everyone be successful. And so, maybe today I'm not keeping the faith, but I'm in a meeting with you and you say, hey, you need to keep the faith, and we all check each other and have that joint sense of accountability. And so that's what has been amazing of getting to live the fundamentals. It's not so much just reading it and going back to my desk and saying, all right, I got to create win-win solutions today. But it's when you're in the moment and you've got 20 people that are all focusing on that, someone in there is going to think of that fundamental. And they got the power and the culture to check and bring it back up and make sure that we're all living those 28 fundamentals. Yeah. And so,
Absolutely.
That's kind of the purpose that we want to get out of this podcast, is to take that one level higher. Mm-hmm. And, we see that, in some meetings and some real small groups, but we want to really expand that and make it a part of not only Diamond C as a whole and every single person new, tenured, but also the community and our customers, community, all those above that, to really fuel our purpose. And so, let's jump right into this week's fundamental, which is keep the faith, right? Keep the faith. And that's kind of why I asked Jeffrey to be my first guest for the very first episode. We're going to start with keep the faith. Who better than the visionary, the CEO of the company, to do that. And so I want to read the fundamental, not to get away from the intentionality of the way it's written, but keep the faith says, maintain a long-term view beyond the challenges of the day. Life will go on. Keep this in perspective. Maintain faith that we can and will be successful, and be a dealer in hope for the future. And so, there's a lot to take in there. And so I want to really open this up to get your interpretation into what jumps out at you, what really speaks to you when you wrote the fundamental and your intention behind adding this to the list.
Yeah, so man, keep the faith. I'm glad you asked me to be featured on this particular fundamental, because it's definitely my favorite. And I would have to say, in short, it's kind of been my lifeline since the beginning of my career here for the last 20 years. Keep the faith beyond the challenges of the day. Anybody that knows our purpose and knows much about Diamond C knows that our purpose statement and what we live by is that our purpose is to fuel the growth and success of our team members, customers, and community abroad. Well, one thing growth includes, without a shadow of a doubt, is challenges on every front, always, forever. Growth does not happen without challenges, without some pain along the way, without changing, without a lot of change, And so since the beginning of my career, in the pursuit of that purpose, there's been plenty of challenges and pain along the way. And the reason I say it's been my lifeline is I've had to keep my eyes on the prize far beyond the challenges of the day in order to have the courage to run back into the fire the next morning, you know? In order to have the courage to get out of bed and do it again when, man, I knew the day was going to be painful, but the promise of hope for tomorrow and what we could accomplish in the long term is what kept me getting out of bed and kept me coming out here and charging forward every day. And not just me, our total team. On so many fronts all over the years, I could tell story after story of people that, lived this fundamental and have been a part of getting us to where we are today. So when we, got to the point of writing these fundamentals, it was like top of the list that we had to have this factor of keeping the faith, and being a dealer in hope is the last line of it. And I think when I think about these days where I'm at with keeping the faith is just an inherent, as you've kind of alluded to, it's just an inherent part of who I am and what I do. And I don't have to think much about keeping the faith when I get out of bed these days, because it's just become so much a part of how my brain works, keeping the faith beyond the challenges of the day. But one piece that I've really, of this fundamental that I've really had to start being more intentional with and careful with is being a dealer in hope. There were definitely long seasons. I mean, even periods of years throughout my career so far where I had the faith and I kept the faith, but I didn't do a very good job of sharing it. I didn't do a very good job of dealing it and explaining it and helping other people to understand it. And so it was easy for, amongst the chaos and the challenges of the day, it was easy for their faith to begin to flicker, their hope to begin to burn out. When they're not refreshed or recharged in that vision of the future, that hope for tomorrow. So these last, I guess, several years that we've been much more intentional in culture building, has definitely been high on my radar. Something that I'm as constantly yearning to be more intentional with is being a dealer in hope, and being more intentional in sharing that vision and that hope for that hope beyond the challenges of the day. It's probably where I still have to work on this fundamental the most, is just making sure that I'm constantly refreshing that vision and renewing that hope with the people around me.
Absolutely. I mean, lots of great stuff in there. When you talk about, being a dealer in hope and the importance of that in your role, but then also in really any leadership,
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, whether the fires of the day or whether it's a week, a month, a year, like you said, there's going to be challenges, and to remain successful, you have to wake up every day with that renewed sense of faith and that renewed energy. And so, I mean, I thought that was a lot of great content there. So when we talk about this fundamental and we want to embed that culture into Diamond C, into our community, how can we give some people some insight onto, live this fundamental and really embody it in their professional and their personal lives? Like, what are some examples of where they could take this, after watching our podcast, they could take it home and really use it tonight, tomorrow?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is just, I think a person first has to really work on cultivating the mindset of keep the faith. Not to skip ahead, but I think we have to work on cultivating that mindset inside of our souls, before we can expect to go out and do a great job at practicing it. So I don't know. I mean, it's different for every person, wherever they are in life, wherever, their journey has led them, whatever challenges they're dealing with. It's different for every person. Absolutely. But, I think a first step is maybe, self-awareness in knowing and learning what are the things that build your hope in your own mind, in your own heart and soul. Yeah. What are the things that build your hope and build your faith? And latching on to those things and investing yourself in those things, learning those things, to grow in those things, grow your own faith and hope in your mind. And then the opposite side of that, what are the things in your life that steal your hope and steal your faith and take away your hope for tomorrow? Identifying those things, knowing those things, and doing your very best. We can't always get rid of those things, unfortunately.
Absolutely not.
But doing our very best to mitigate those things, to decrease those things that steal our hope and steal our faith, and to build up this mindset of hope beyond tomorrow and hope beyond the challenges of today. And once we begin to cultivate that mindset and see that, hey, life does go on beyond the challenges of today. Hey, there is another chance tomorrow. Then when we're faced with the challenge of the day, whatever it is, like, be it, one of my kids at home has a bad spelling test or a serious health issue, or fill in the blank. I mean, a million things that, I've got a bunch of little kids. And so every day is a guaranteed unknown. I mean, for us, there are so many, expect the unexpected in my house. So every day there's a new challenge with one of the kids or the other. And, if we're doing a good job of cultivating that mind and heart set of keeping the faith, then it's much easier to walk into those situations and coach and lead our kids and to have hope beyond the challenge of the day. Versus
you talk about, be a dealer, right?
Yeah, be a dealer in hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's leadership, it's influence. And it's an interesting thing about influence where, a lot of folks might write this fundamental off or might write off certain leadership practices if they say, I'm not a leader, I'm not a department manager.
Right.
But if you're influencing anyone, kids, friends, workplace, community, anywhere, if you're influencing anywhere, you're a leader and you have a responsibility to be a dealer in hope. We have to do it with our kids. Absolutely. Because we're teaching them the way we react to those situations. We're absolutely influencing the way they are going to react to those types of challenges along the way.
Yeah. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but whether you want to or not, you're always influencing, right?
Absolutely.
You're either positively or negatively. In some manner, we're always influencing the people around us, whether it's, peers or supervisor or, direct reports or any, or family. Like at some point, any interaction with somebody creates some kind of influential environment.
Absolutely.
And, and like you're saying, we can choose to be a dealer in hope in that and someone who keeps the faith and inspires others to act or to, to maintain positive attitude or whatever the other fundamental would be, but we're always going to be an influential person, no matter what the environment is. And like you said, whether we're a leader or we're not. And so you kind of, like you said, not to skip ahead, but let's go there a little bit and let's talk about when we're not keeping the faith, right? Mm-hmm. It happens to the best of us, right? Absolutely. And you say that through your experiences and your tenure and, the ups and downs of Diamond C, you've really become habitual about keeping the faith and it's become part of who you are. But that's because you've had to do it so many times that it's habitual, that it's part of you. And that's the ultimate goal, right? To make to repeat these fundamentals to get to a point where they become who you are and you become part of your success. So how can we coach and provide some guidance for our listeners on how to recognize when we're not keeping the faith? Because sometimes we don't realize it in the moment and we think that we think we're doing our best job. We think we're coming in with the right attitude, but we may have lost faith. We may have lost our direction or maybe we're not having the most positive attitude or outlook or, letting the fires of the day. Like, so how do we identify that? And then how do we get back on track? How do we get back to keeping the faith?
Yes. You said identify it. Self-awareness. I'm going to go back to self-awareness for a moment.
Right.
Being self-aware and what our attitude is and our approach is when we walk through the door at home, at work, anywhere. Is it negative? Is it sarcastic? Is it hopeless? When I come and ask you for help with a project, do you roll your eyes when I turn around and walk away? Catch yourself doing those things and be self-aware. All of those things to me are indicators that there's an alignment issue. We're not seeing the same hope.
Right.
We may have some kind of hope, but we're not seeing the same hope. We're not keeping the same kind of faith. We're not on the same page in that regard, and deal with whatever those things are. I said, know what steals your hope earlier. Confront those things, but be it at work or otherwise. If here recently we've been talking a lot about kind of interdepartmental peer-to-peer accountability. If the department next to you is not pulling their weight and constantly causing your department to fail or not hit their marks, you have to confront that. You can't let that department's failure continue to steal your hope.
Absolutely.
And take your faith away that your team's going to be successful, because no matter how hard you try, your team's not going to be successful until they're successful. And so you can't let it lie. You have to confront those things, and take it to your leader and do what you need to do to deal with that issue that's stealing your hope.
Call the meeting, right?
Call the meeting.
Speak straight.
Yeah, you have to deal with that issue that's stealing your faith that your team can and will be successful. And that can present so many different ways in all parts of life. So we can't sit here on this podcast today and give one way to fix that.
Right.
But I'm saying be self-aware. Know what those indicators are. One thing I think is oftentimes an indicator is just lack of engagement. I think is oftentimes an indicator that someone has lost the faith, so to speak, or is not hopeful for the track you're on. Maybe they're usually someone that's very engaged and high contributor to the conversation. And then you begin to notice, he's kind of gone silent. He's not saying much. What's going on there?
Right.
And, it's not necessarily a telltale. It could be a million things in his life. But I'm saying silence, disengagement. It doesn't have to be
Could be a red flag, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Could be a red flag.
Something's going on there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a dramatic eye roll. But disengagement. All those things to me are, red flags of the faith is fading. And there's an issue or issues that are not being addressed that need to be dealt with using all these other fundamentals that you just mentioned a moment ago. Yeah.
And I want to connect something here as we go back and we talked about that accountability system that kind of embeds itself when you really try and live these 28 fundamentals. When we see someone who, and let's say, we have an interaction and then behind you leave and I roll my eyes and, oh, here we go again.
Influence.
And then here comes somebody behind, in my department, everybody's like, hey, keep the faith, right? Speak straight. If you got a problem, call the meeting,
absolutely.
And that's where we can really use, those fundamentals to not only get ourselves back on track, but be a dealer in hope. And sometimes the deal and what you're dealing is another fundamental, right? It's pushing them to, hey, you've lost the faith or the way you're acting and, it is not going to help you be successful. Right. And I think that's the really the way that you can frame this and maintain that encouragement perspective and that approach of encouragement is to say, when you break from these fundamentals, when you're not keeping the faith, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to be successful. Right. And so, I thought it was a lot of great points and as we wrap up this episode, I think that the couple takeaways that I want our listeners to have is, not only do you need to maintain and keep the faith yourself, but you need to be a dealer in hope.
Absolutely, share it.
Dealer of hope and a true leader, a true positive influence on their community or their workplace or their family is always being a dealer of hope. You gave the example of your kids. You can do the workplace in your department, whatever it is in your community, be a dealer in hope. There's been a lot of hard times in Diamond C and, in the past year struggles. And, you can really take that back into your day tomorrow and be a dealer in hope.
Absolutely.
And you talked about the next takeaway is that I wanted them to make sure that we really hammer home is that be self-aware and really examine where's your faith at? Where are you at in keeping the faith in your workplace? Do you really have faith in your supervisor? Do you have faith in the company? Do you have faith in yourself? And really having that self-awareness to take those moments to examine your actions, examine your direction. And then, if you find yourself struggling, if you feel like you've hit a wall, you feel frustrated, go back to all the fundamentals and really think and analyze, do I need to call the meeting? Do I need to speak straight and tell them that I'm having trouble with this or, hey, I don't really see the vision that you see. This is taking my faith away. Can you be a dealer in hope for me? I need you to deal me some hope. And sometimes that's what it takes, right?
Absolutely.
And so I really wanted to thank you coming on this week. A lot of great content. This is our first episode of our Fundamentals for Success series. We're going to be doing this every week. Diving into each of our 28 fundamentals to hopefully really provide some insight and some guidance for you to take back into your professional and personal lives and really hopefully be more successful and find that happiness and find that faith from this podcast. And so next week we'll be going over create win-win solutions and we'll have another special guest. But until then, thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
And catch us next week for the second installment of the Fundamentals for Success podcast.